Hello and welcome to the 12 Months to Marathon podcast with me, John Hill, the running podcast for the over 35s with Marathon Dreams, episode 84, why everybody should be talking about splits. So what's going on with me at the moment? I am halfway through week 10 as I record this of my marathon training plan. So we're well over halfway. This has been a bit of an adaptation week for me and I'm very tired, got a bit of a cold. And yeah, it's just one of those things. So yeah, just muddling it all together this week a little bit fatigued. But I think as you get into your marathon training cycle, if you're doing it properly, then when you get to this kind of point, just before, in my opinion, the real silliness starts for me, which is 11, 12 and 13, you've got to accept that there is going to be a bit of a kickback from that, especially if you are over 35. I'm nearly 50, so I accept that to a certain degree, and that's fine. I've just done a run as I record this, and it was a little bit wobbly in bits when it was supposed to be a pacier run, but that's okay. You learn and you know your abilities and you know things like that. So if you are in the middle of marathon training at the moment, or you're over the middle of marathon training at the moment, then keep going. This is the tough bit. This is the bit that makes you, and trust me, this is what builds the marathon runner. So I wanted to talk about splits because I've not done a specific podcast on splits before, and it's on the back of a conversation I had earlier this week. So if you don't know, I was primarily a one-to-one personal trainer up until around the pandemic, so up until around 2020, and then things started to shift a little bit for me after the pandemic. I started to move more towards doing other things in the fitness game, which eventually led me to be specifically a running coach. And I've got a couple of one-to-one clients left who I've trained for years and years and years. They've just stuck with me. We're more like friends now, and we just train. So both of them actually we do running sessions because it's what they want to do. They just want to run. And on Monday, as I record this, I had a conversation with the client of mine, and we were talking about his improvement in his running. And the biggest improvement that I said to him was that it was his splits. So he was showing and demonstrating more control across the distance that we run. So it wasn't all over the place. He wasn't starting off at, say, these are just numbers. So 10-minute miles, for example, and then going up to 12-minute miles and then coming back down to 10 and up. You know what I mean? So it sparked in my head this thing about splits and how I don't talk about it enough on this podcast, and I've not really spoken about it enough. And actually, I think if you want to get better at running, and you really want to get better at running, and particularly distance running, you've got to understand this concept. It's very important and how it can help you. So that's what I wanted to talk about with you today. So if you don't know, basically, a split is the difference between the time of each individual section of the run. So that can either be kilometres or miles. I'm going to do things in miles today, okay, just to keep it simple. So if you're looking at your miles, let's say you want to do a 4-hour marathon, which I think off the top of my head is 9-minute miles, right? So if you want to do 9-minute miles, then basically you want to be around that pace for the entire run, or in my experience, somewhere in the range of about 20 seconds difference, 20 to 30 seconds tops, but probably around 20, yeah? Which means that if your average pace is 9-minute miles, you want to hit 9-minute miles, say, for that marathon, then you probably want to be skirting between 8:50s and 9:10s. So you can sort of hit that average. That makes sense. So you will go potentially a little bit faster and potentially a little bit slower, but on the whole, you'll stay within that average, and that's monitoring your average pace. Now, I think that splits are very important for the new runner or somebody doing the first marathon, because probably if you're an experienced runner, or you're somebody that's perhaps gone up to the faster pace, so sort of sub-4 marathons, pushing 3.5s, maybe pushing 3s and sub-3s, you're probably aware of your split times, because distance running is about control. Yeah, first and foremost, particularly distance running is about control. If you're running, say, a really, really fast 5K, yes, it's about control, but that control hasn't got to last that long. Because if you're, say, doing a sub 20-minute 5K, so let's say you're going really fast, you're doing a sub 20-minute 5K, then that's not that long. Yeah. But if you're doing a 3-hour marathon, that's a long time. Even though sub 3 hours and 3 hours is quick, it's still a long time. So you've got to get a better grasp of control of your runs. If you're a new runner, one of the biggest mistakes that I see new runners make is they say they want to improve, but then they don't look at their splits. Okay. And the reason why I say they wanted to improve is because if you don't want to improve and you're just happy being what I call a enjoyment runner, then that's okay. Do whatever you want because you're doing something and you're out there and there's no gatekeeping, there's no requirement. What I'm talking about is someone who comes to me and says, John, I want to improve. Yeah. So if somebody wants to improve, I think the first thing they need to get a grasp on is the difference between each mile or each kilometre when they are running at any distance. Because that tells me how much control they have over their run and how much concentration. Yeah. You've got to bear in mind that we live in a world where everybody says they're busy and they're not, they're distracted. We live in a world with more distractions than ever. Yeah. People looking at the phone while they're driving, people looking at the phone while they're doing everything, people looking at people elsewhere when they're somewhere else. Yeah, they're already trying to be somewhere else in their mind. And that's because we live in a world of constant dopamine hits and constant distraction. Separate issue to this podcast, but it's true in the sense of running, because if you are focused on the run you're doing, then you should be focused on that run and that run alone. Yeah, and be completely 100% focused on that. So if to do that, I think you've got to manage your splits well, because you don't want to be going like starting off at 10-minute miles, going up to 12, and come back to 10, going up to 11. You want to be in this range where you're fully in control, because that, not only from a physical standpoint, but also from a mental standpoint, gives you that peace of mind to know, I've got this, I can do this. Now, when I've done my really quick marathons and I've looked at my splits afterwards, I've been within 20 to 30 seconds. And that was an unconscious thing, because you can't allow yourself to get too excited, particularly at the start. Now, what was an interesting statistic about the 2025 big spring marathons here in the UK, right, which are London and Manchester, which are the two biggest. And the reason why I give those as an example is because they were both hot. Now, majority of the people that listen to this podcast are from the UK, right? Now, you'll have the equivalent in the US, you'll have, similar ones around the world, but let's just use these two as an example. And the reason why I use those two as an example is they were very hot. The days were very hot, unseasonably hot, particularly for Manchester, because I've done Manchester 4 times. It's never been anywhere near to that hot up there. London's different because it's in a massive city, and there's a natural element of heat anyway. But anyway, so those hot runs, yeah, they caught a lot of people out. Now, interestingly, there was a statistic in London that said the fastest split in London was the first 5K, right? Which meant that on average, across the whole number of participants, the 50,000 people that did it, the fastest split was the first 5K, which isn't surprising because people start marathons far too fast. And what they don't do is they don't say, can I hold this pace for the next, 37K if you've done 5K, yeah? Can I hold this pace for the next 37K, yeah? And you need to be aware of that, particularly if you're traditionally an enjoyment runner, which means you don't really look at your performance. You have to look at your splits, particularly if you're doing your first marathon, because you want to stay in control, okay? And you don't want to leave anything to chance, and you do want to be pedantic, and you do want to focus on it. And I mean that sincerely. And that's got, irrespective about whether your goal is just to get round or anything like that, that's all fine. But I really recommend, particularly if you're new or you're a beginner, that you really look at this over the next few weeks. So a lot of people listening to this have probably got a good anywhere from sort of 6 to 8 weeks left of their marathon training cycle, particularly if you're doing marathons in the spring. My recommendation would be to get a grasp on this, to really look at the splits. So back to that concept of enjoyment runner. I've mentioned this before, but I've mentioned it again because we've got a lot of new listeners. So you've got, in my opinion, this might help, there's a difference between an enjoyment runner and a performance runner. Yeah, an enjoyment runner is that person that just does what they do. They do it for health, well-being, mental health, which we all do, granted, I know. But they're not looking to say, go any faster, go any further. Like I know people that just do the same pace for every single run they do. Brilliant, brilliant. You do you, live the dream. If you then step into a performance-based situation, which is I want to get better, I want to go further, I want to get faster, you've then got to adopt a different mindset, because I've had conversations with people who run for enjoyment, but then beat themselves up when they do an organised event and it's not the time that they wanted. And I always say to them, well, you can't go in with an enjoyment-based mindset when you're looking to improve your performance. You've got to be, aware, so you can critically analyse your own performance without taking it personally. Yeah, and that's the difference when you enjoy it. Because if you're not looking to get any better, who cares what you do? But if you're looking to get better, then you have to say, okay, where can I improve here? And for me, the first place to start will always be your splits. 100% your splits, because that's what I see from people who are perhaps wanting to maybe go a little bit further, don't have the confidence in themselves. So their posture as a runner, they look down, they drag their feet. They've got this almost what I call negative posture, basically, of I don't feel confident doing this. I mean, that's probably a separate podcast for a different day about your posture, but I think it's really important. So, and that then affects their splits because they allow things like hills, they allow things like, the time to get to them versus, actually saying, okay, I need to just focus here and try and keep everything level. On that point of hills, it's good. That's a really good point, actually. If you're, say, doing a hilly run, it's better to run slowly and then try and keep your splits level, even up the hills, than try and run fast and then slow right down on the hills. Yeah, because then you're more in control. I promise you, if you can get your head around this, you're going to be successful, and it's really going to help you, particularly if you're a beginner. If you can just look at it cold and say, I need to get control of each of each kilometre or each mile, and say, I need to keep that within 20 seconds, because that then firmly focuses you on what you're doing. You're not thinking about the end. You're not wishing it was over. You're not doing any of that. You're saying, right, how do I maneuver this thing round so it suits me so I can stay in control throughout the whole thing? Because if you are going for a marathon distance, it's all about control. All about control, 100%. The best marathon runners, from whatever pace, whatever, it doesn't matter, are in control throughout the whole run. The worst experience of my life in marathon terms was not being in control. And, like my first marathon, it was hot, underprepared, underfueled, blah, 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 all the mistakes that everybody makes, me included. And I just remember 16 miles, and I thought, I'm done, and I've got 10 miles left. I thought, I have to pull some out of the bag here. I wouldn't want anybody that I coach or work with to go through that. So I want everybody to be as much in control as they possibly can. And it was interesting that when we did the spring marathon 2025, when we did our group there who came through for help for the spring marathons, a lot of them were actually okay, even in the heat, because they'd gone through the right training and gone through the right structure. So here's it in a nutshell. If you are somebody who thinks or believes you're a beginner or thinks you're a slow runner or any of these self-limiting beliefs, but you want to get better, you've got to change your mindset towards your performance, and you have to change your mindset towards your numbers and your statistics. You are in control of this stuff, okay? You can keep your splits tight. It doesn't matter the pace. That's irrelevant, because managing your splits can be done at any pace. So we need to park the pace thing. It's not about that. It's about managing your splits at any pace. So that's first and foremost. And if you can get your head around this and pay attention to this, I promise you, it's really going to help you. So my advice to you, no matter where you're at, is on your next run, if you're one of these people that perhaps classes themselves as a slow runner or beat yourself up mentally for your running ability, just look at the numbers. Just look at the splits and see where you're at and see how much control you're in. And of course, if you've got any questions or want me to clarify anything, all you need to do is hop on over to Instagram at 12 Months to Marathon. Follow me if you don't already, and drop me a message and ask me a specific question, or ask me some questions and I can always do a podcast or a video on it to help you out. Okay, so that's splits. Really important. I believe everybody should be looking at it, particularly first timers and people who may be lacking the confidence in their running ability, because it will help you to build that confidence and also build your ability as a runner. So thank you very much for listening. As always, I do appreciate it. If you're brand new to the podcast here, please do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from. Apple or Spotify is much appreciated. If you are listening on Spotify or Apple, make sure to drop me a quick review. Really helps, or a comment. Really useful, really helps me, and share this podcast with your friends. If you want to hop over to Instagram and follow me over there at 12 Months to Marathon, it's always appreciated. And if you hop over to my bio and click the link there, you can join my free online running community for the over 35s, where we can take you away from the noise of social media and connect over there. So again, thank you very much for listening. As always, I do appreciate it, and I'll speak to you all again very soon indeed.